So you're in a book slump and you don't know what to do. Well, I'm here to help you. I think the question I see the most like pop up, whether that's in comments, DMs, anything, Destiny, I'm in a book slump, what should I do? Or Destiny, I'm in a book slump, what should I read? Well, now you guys can just reference this video because we're answering those questions all in one. Today I'm going to give you guys some tips and also some book recommendations to help you out of a book slump. Now I should say this, these are not like guaranteed to get you out of a book slump because everybody's different, but this is like my personal ways and recommendations to help with that. So hopefully it does give you a little bit of help. But honestly, it would probably be more convenient if like all of this information was just in like one place, like a blog or a website. And like if you wanted to make that website, like you could absolutely go to squarespace.com, which is the sponsor of today's video. And you guys could basically just go on there, and as soon as you go on squarespace.com, there's like so many templates to choose from. So it's so easy. Whatever you want to do, you can pick any template that you want and personalize it any way you want. And then next up, there are so many different like tools and formats that you can use. Like I think that this would work best as a blog. So you can literally just go through the website, do whatever you want to do, shape the blog to go however you want. And then if you wanted to look in like the analytical side of it and see like how many people have visited and like where they're coming from and how many people you're helping with your book slump tip, you could go to like the data and analytics and see where everybody's coming from, what's bringing them into the website. And if you're running like a scheduled business, you can like do scheduling and everything off of it. I mean, it's all so convenient. And then, you know, like you're running this blog to help people with book slumps, right? You can like link your socials. That way you can help them with like even more stuff and they can go to your socials. And then also there's like a community part of the blogging feature where people can comment back and forth to each other. That way you are building a sense of community while helping people with your book slump tips all on Squarespace. So if this sounds interesting to you, then you guys can definitely head to squarespace.com down below and you guys can start your free trial. And then when you guys are ready to launch, you guys can go to squarespace.com/DestinyStittle to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. And let's first of all get into some book slump tips. If you guys are searching for some credentials that you need, like to see like Destiny, why should we be listening to you? In 2023, I think I went through 3 book slumps, one of them majorly. I think it lasted from like April to June. So April, May, and June, I was just in like huge book slumps and I couldn't really get through anything and I wasn't really enjoying anything that I was reading. And here are some things that I feel like really helped me. This first tip I feel like is very, very crucial and I want to start with this, and that is to give yourself grace and time. I understand firsthand, and I'm pretty sure every reader has experienced this at some point, how absolutely frustrating it is to be in a book slump. It's like one of the top 10 most frustrating things that can happen as a reader. I think one of the biggest mistakes made as a reader when in a book slump is to try to force yourself into liking a book. Keep on picking up books or keep on going through a book that you're just not enjoying, and then you end up rating a bunch of books low that may not even be bad. It's just that you are in a book slump and just ultimately nothing good comes out of it. One of the things that I recommend doing and that I had to tell myself when I was in my book slump is to just kind of take a step back and give yourself time. I feel like book slumps come from burnout because with anything in life, if you do something so much, if you eat something all the time, if you're doing something all the time, I feel like everybody inevitably gets the sense of burnout, and I feel like burnout and book slump go hand in hand. And that's where I feel definitely happened to me, was that it was more a burnout induced book slump. So when you were in a stage of burnout, I think one of the absolute worst things that you can do is to keep on doing that thing. I would just recommend taking some time back, maybe chill, catch up on some shows or movies that you haven't been able to watch yet. But just ultimately the point being, take a set amount of time to just really distance yourself from it and just give yourself some grace and slowly dip your toe back in the water of reading. Because also one of the things that I feel like is not going to help is you like trying to finish a book in a day and not finishing books fast enough. Like maybe just start out, once you start back into reading, like maybe just 5 pages a day and see how those 5 pages go over, and then once you get it back into that groove, it will be fine. Tip number 2, try a reread. Now, I know some people are gonna be like, I'm not a reread person. I used to never be a reread person. I thought that it was like a waste of time to reread a book that I had already read, when there are so many out there, of course, that we know that we want to get to in this lifetime, and there's just like never enough time. Too many books, too little time. That's something that like Hobby Lobby would say. But I will say this, to spark back that love in reading, after being in a book slump, I feel like it would really help to pick up a book that you already know you love. Like, even if you know the book inside out, I feel like it helps to bring back that like giddy feeling, that very happy feeling that you get with the 5-star read. So I feel like when we're dipping our toes back in the water to start reading again after being in a book slump, I feel like picking up a reread can really help spark that intense happiness feeling that we get around reading. And then once you have this positive attitude because you've picked up a book that you know you love, and you kind of get this more like positive an attitude towards reading again, then we can start picking up new books. Which leads us into tip number 3, which is when we start picking up other books, to start with something simple. One thing that I do not recommend is to go into either super complicated books or just like a very difficult genre. Like, we're all different readers, but for me personally, if I'm in a book slump, I know I cannot pick up like a super complicated fantasy book because that is like too much brain power, and you're thinking too much about the book, and you're having to put too much thought into it when reading is escapism at the end of the day. And yes, those fantasy books are really good, and when you are in a reading mood, you can put the brain power and effort into understanding them, but when you're in that book slump, sometimes that effort is just a little bit too much to put into it. Also, not a book that's super long, not a book that's super complicated, because ultimately I feel like this can bring back that overwhelming feeling around reading. And since hopefully with that reread and some time off, we have gave ourselves a more positive attitude to go into reading, I feel like picking up a long book or a confusing book or an intimidating book can bring back that overwhelming and negative attitude towards reading that's just going to further put you into a slump. Personally, with my reading taste, I would probably go into either like a light young adult book or like a cute, short, fluffy romance book that I just know is going to get me through it, or even like a short literary book. Just a book that I know that I personally could get through at more of a fast paced, and it just kind of has more of a simple plot. Tip number 4 is just something that I feel like can help with you building a connection to characters, which can really spark want to continue to read books, which is either start or continue a series. So for example, one of these series that I feel like is really good if you are in a book slump, trying to get out of a book slump, is the Addicted series. The reason that I say this is because the Addicted series doesn't necessarily even have a plot. You are just really following characters. It's more of a character study. You get fairly attached to the characters very quickly, and it's just such an entertaining storyline as well. So something like that, if you have found a series that you are really liking, I would recommend continuing it or picking up another series. Those characters kind of feel like home to you, and they're very cozy, and you get really attached to them because, for example, if I were to pick up the Addicted series, I would just want to keep on picking up the next book in the series because I love the characters so much and I'm very attached to their storyline. The last tip that I have, which is number 5, is to listen to an audiobook. I used to not be an audiobook listener, and I think that we're all tired of hearing about how much I love audiobooks at this point. I literally listen to a form of audiobook every single day. I absolutely love them. I am somebody who does not like imagine things very easily when I'm reading a book. Like if I'm reading a fantasy book, I don't really imagine like the characters or the fantasy world because I feel like sometimes reading the words on paper, it doesn't really commute to my brain. But when I listen to it and I listen to it being described to me through an audiobook, I feel like it sparks my imagination more, I understand it more, and I just have like a really good time reading it, and it really puts the information and catalogs it into my brain. But also, when you're in a slump, sometimes you don't feel like sitting down with a book and just kind of like looking at it, and maybe you're in a slump because you have a lot of different things going on in your life at the moment and you don't really necessarily have the time to sit down and read. This is where I feel like audiobooks are really good because you can be doing other things. You can be at the gym, you can be driving, you can be putting away laundry, doing laundry, cleaning up around the house, and you can have your headphones on listening to an audiobook. That way you're still reading and you're still getting these stories in, but you may even be like knocking out other things in the day. And I feel like this is really going to help also just get that reading in while you are still doing other things. You still feel good because you were still reading these books that you were wanting to read. So those are the 5 tips that I have to help you guys get out of a book slump. Now I want to talk about the books that I recommend to get you out of this book slump or to help you while you are in it. So I broke it down into different categories. So we have young adult, romance, thriller, and literary fiction, and we have some fantasy. Now, I'm not recommending a lot of fantasy books because like I said earlier, I am a fantasy reader. I do love fantasy books. When I am in a book slump, to go and pick up a book that has a complicated magic system, a lot of world building, I just can't do it. So the fantasy books that I have picked out to recommend for you guys are simple world building, simple magic system that you can just get into and don't require a whole lot of brain power. So let's get into the recommendations. I'm going to start off with the young adult genre. First and foremost, we have the Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is my favorite series from this author, 100%. If you you guys are looking for an extremely fast-paced characters that you get very, very attached to, because this also has like the found family trope in them, I would recommend this one. I always describe this as like FBI Criminal Minds, but for teenagers. Speaking with that same author, we have the Inheritance Games trilogy, which there is this book, which is The Brothers Hawthorne, because the author has like continued on with these characters but made it into a new series. So this is the trilogy, and then this is like the book that you get to read after these that follows the brother. Specifically with this one, short chapters, page turning. It's very much like Knives Out vibes if you guys love that movie. And they're just like honestly no brain power. You don't really have to think about what you're reading, if that makes any sense. You literally feel like you're sitting down and watching a movie because everything is just happening in front of you. Also, for a series that is really good and has a really good TV show to go with it, I have the Summer I Turned Pretty trilogy by Jenny Han. They're just so simple and easy to get through, and I feel like these have a form of nostalgia to them, especially the first book. I say every single time that I've reread these books that I just like, it takes me back to summers as a kid, even though my summers didn't like look exactly like this. Just the nostalgic feeling around these books are just so cozy. Like, even though they take place over the summer, they're so cozy to me. It's like putting on a warm blanket. They're very short, they're very fast-paced and easy. There's a super engaging love triangle in these books, and like I said, the TV show that goes with it is really good. Okay, and then for some cute, just easy young adult romances, I have Alex Approximately. This one, I just always, like, when I think of young adult romances, this one always comes to the forefront of my mind. Secret Identity. She works at this movie theater. Like, there's so much character in this book, and there's just something about it. Like, the aura around this book of like when I read it and everything, it takes place in California, and I just loved the entire vibes of it. And then my favorite young adult book, period, especially romance, I love this author's young adult books. We have Lynn Painter's Better Than the Movies. If you are a lover of rom-com, period, you need to pick up this book. This book feels like such an OG rom-com, like an early 2000s rom-com in the absolute best way possible. It's such a feel-good book, and it literally, I know I keep on saying the word rom-com, so we're all probably annoyed by that by now, but it literally feels like sitting down and just reading one in the best way possible. And then still in the young adult genre, if you guys are looking for something a little bit more like thrilling, and we have The Grace Year. This one is described as like The Handmaid's Tale meets Lord of the Flies. I've never read either of those books, so I literally cannot attest to you if that is correct whatsoever. But I can tell you that I really love this book. It's very dystopian. It's very like you're questioning what's even going on, and the storyline is absolutely insane, and I loved this book so much. It's very much more of like a dark book, so if you're not into that, I wouldn't recommend this for you. For the thrillers, we have There's Someone Inside Your House. I want you guys to do me a favor. I know you guys are seeing where you can't take the sticker off, but I know you guys are seeing that it's a Netflix film. I want you guys to ignore that. I want you guys to never watch the film for this because they butchered it. This book, though, is so good. I remember reading it, and if you are somebody who loves like slasher films, like think Scream, Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like think those movies, which I huge fans of. I love slasher horror films. This gives me those vibes 100%. And even though it is young adult, I feel like again it does go there with it, where you're like, wow, I can't believe that this young adult book is going there, but not like crossing a line. Of course, we have A Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy. If you guys haven't picked this up yet, literally what are you doing? There's a TV show in production that I just know was gonna eat. But this one, I'm just gonna tell you about the first one. You're following Pip, and she basically has a school project, and for it she's doing this podcast format of trying to figure out what happened to this girl who was murdered in her town, because she doesn't believe that they got the right guy. I feel like Holly Jackson pushes that line. It doesn't cross it, but she pushes that line where it's like, sometimes I don't want to read young adult thrillers because I'm like, okay, like it's not going to be very thrilling, but these are very like easy, fast reads, and they keep your attention, and I feel like she does kind of push that line of like, wow, I can't believe this is happening in a YA book. Since we just got done with young adult thrillers, I wanted to go into adult thrillers that if you're looking for one, these I feel are very fast-paced, twisty, and you can get through fairly quickly. First of all, we have No Exit by Taylor Adams. I am a big fan of this author's thrillers. Both of the thrillers that I've read from him have been rated very highly. This one is about a girl, and she basically gets caught in this snowstorm, so she has to stop off at this rest stop with like a bunch of other strangers that are in this rest stop with her, and they can't go anywhere. And at one point she goes outside and she sees a little girl trapped in the van, and so she needs to discreetly figure out who owns the van and how she's going to get this little girl out of the situation where they can't even leave. I want to keep on the theme of talking about this author. This is another one of his books that I read. This came out this year. This is The Last Word. I love the premise of this. It's basically about a girl. She's sitting alone in this house. She She reviews a book, gives it 1 star, the author starts literally stalking her. And that was enough to put my jaw on the floor, but also this book had everything I was looking for in a thriller. It's extremely fast-paced, it is extremely page-turning, and it is thrilling at the end of the day. I miss that like thrilling aspect of books a lot. Even when I rate a thriller highly, it's barely because it actually made me feel like that thrilling feeling. It's just because like it was good, fast-paced, a lot of twists and turns, but this one actually had that thrilling factor into it where I was literally like on the edge of my seat wondering what's going to happen next. Next up we have None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I feel like Lisa Jewell is a very much like respected author in the thriller space. The way that this book is even formatted, straight up feels like a Netflix documentary, and it is told like in a Netflix documentary style, but it literally feels like I was watching a Netflix documentary. I could not put this book down. It was so like, I feel like with Lisa Jewell, you're not getting a thrilling aspect. It's more dark and twisty. You were still on the edge of your seat to like wonder what's going on. Loved the way that this book was set up, the way that it was formatted, just everything about it. It was so good. Okay, now let's go on a lighter note and let's start talking about some of my favorite romances. Number 1, of course, we have The 7-Year Slip. If you guys have not read this book yet, please, please, please give it a try, especially if you love New York. This book is written in a way that makes New York feel so magical. It is about this girl. She lives in her aunt's apartment now, and basically one day she comes home from work and she finds this guy in her apartment, and she's basically, I mean, of course she's panicked. What are you doing in my apartment? She quickly finds out that this is actually 7 years in the past when she steps into the apartment. Like if she stepped out of the apartment, it's still like present day, but when she steps into the apartment, it is now 7 years in the past. So she has this guy from 7 years in the past. She's talking to him, and there's a lot of things going on all at once in this book. Such a beautiful story with beautiful quotes, beautiful writing. If you're wanting another swoon-worthy romance, I would recommend Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I really love all of Ali Hazelwood's books, but this one by far is my most favorite. I just loved the couple in this book. The guy specifically, he could read her emotions very well, and he like very much just like paid attention to everything that was going on. Ali Hazelwood did dive more into like STEM and like women in STEM, tackled some issues that are in that community and in that space, and I just really enjoyed that as well. Like I didn't know if that was something that I would enjoy, and I didn't know that was something going into the book, but I really, really loved it, all of that stuff, and it made a really, really good story. But of course, I would always also recommend The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This was her first book ever, and this one is just so cute. Next up, we have these 2 books by Sarah Adams, and these 2, I say these 2 books specifically because a partnership. They go together, but you don't have to like read one book to read the other, but I would recommend reading When in Rome first. And look at how like short these books are. These books are so short, they're cute, easy, and fun to get through. This one is about a pop star, and she basically like desperately needs a vacation. She loves Audrey Hepburn, especially the Roman holiday movie, so she heads off to Rome, Kentucky, not Rome, Italy, and she basically breaks down in front of this guy's house, and then she has to stay with him for a little bit, and it's their romance. He owns a pie shop, and it's in a like super small town that everybody knows each other, and it's just so endearing and sweet. And then you have Practice Makes Perfect about his sister and her bodyguard, and she loves romance books. It takes place in that same exact town. She owns a flower shop. It is so cute, and like I said, there's just no brain power and so easy to get through. Next, I feel like I really don't ever talk about this, but I feel like this is the epitome that if you are in a book slump, this romance book will get you out of it. This is the Romance Book Club. These books are so cheesy, but I love them so much for that. They're a little bit longer, but it is basically about a group of guys who get together and they have their romance book club, and they read romance novels that they call like, what do they call them? It's been a long time since I have read this book. They read these romance books so that they can understand their women significant others better. Isn't that just the dream? Next up, I just wanted to chat with you guys about some of my literary fiction books that I feel like are very easy to get through. The storyline's not too heavy. First of all, anything Ellen Hildebrand. Literally, she is like the queen of the beach read. I have a few books from her, and I've enjoyed every single one that I've ever read. My personal favorite is The Hotel Nantucket. And then we have The Storied Life of A.J. Thickery. First of all, look at how short this book is. This book is basically about a grumpy man who owns a bookstore, and I tell you that in the lightest way possible because it's about so much more than that. It was so endearing and heartwarming. Next up, we have Mary Jane. This is a story that takes place in the 1970s. It's very much coming of age, and you are kind of seeing these 2 families that have very different values and beliefs. And the girl, Mary Jane, babysits for this family that's very different from her. So she's in this environment with her family, and then she's kind of introduced to this whole entire other world when babysitting for this family. And it's just basically a story of that summer of her babysitting for them. Then we have The Lost Ticket. This book is so endearing and sweet. It is about a woman who is navigating troubles and turmoil inside of her own life, but she meets this old man one day on the bus, and he basically tells her about this like long lost story of this woman that he met one time on the bus, and then he never like got to see her again, but he's thought about her for years, and so she makes it her life's mission to help him find her, and you see like a bunch of strangers team up to help. It is, this whole entire book, it's so endearing and it's so sweet, and I was so in love with every single character. It was like a warm hug. I loved this book so much. Last but not least, we're going to talk about some fantasy books that I feel like are very simple magic systems that you guys can get into and get it if you guys are wanting a fantasy book. This one's an adult fantasy, but first off we have Vicious by V.E. Schwab. There's not really even like a magic system or world building required. It's just about two characters whom you are rooting for. It's like good versus evil, but then it's like not what you think it is. It takes place out of college, and they basically are doing this investigation, and they both get superpowers, and that's pretty much it. Next up, we have Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This one is the same, where it's not a super complicated magic system or world building to understand. You're kind of just thrown into it. Honestly, there's not even like needing to build up the world. And this one is more study on the characters than the plot. Thing with Divine Rivals, this one is way more about the characters and like the world that they are in. Like what's going on is very much in the background of this book. Like you're introduced to it, but then you like focus in on the two characters and what they have going on and their romance. And the romance in this book is just so good. This one's like fantasy, but it's romantic-y. Same thing with the Shatter Me series. This one is very much more dystopian, so there is magic and there's a world, but I feel like you don't really have to get the like build up of the magic in the world in this one either, and this one definitely has a lot of romance within it as well. And then we have Heartless by Marissa Meyer. This one, again, there's not really like a world to get introduced to. It is just a Queen of Hearts retelling, so imagine just a kingdom, and that's what you're in essentially. Then we have Caraval. I've only read the first book in this series, but this one is honestly no brain power. It's like a circus, and there's just kind of like twist and turny things going on. It feels very fairy tale-esque. And then last but certainly not least, of course, we have the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. This one, again, literally imagine Alice in Wonderland. Like it's like a fairy tale. So guys, I hope that you have at least came from this video with some new recommendations or some tips to help next time that you're in a book slump, or maybe if you're in a book slump right now. I really hope these helped in some way. If it did, let me know down below. If you guys like this video, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff you guys know how to do. I appreciate you guys so much for clicking on this video and watching it all the way through if you're watching until now, which if you are, literally claps of applause for you because I know it was probably hard. And thank you so much again, Squarespace, for sponsoring today's video, and I will see you guys when I see ya. Peace.